When Grace Halstead locked eyes with the new gardener, she never imagined it would spark a love so fierce it would defy her father, her town, and everything she'd been raised to believe. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn of Oakwood Estate. Grace Halstead stood at her bedroom window, gazing out at the sprawling gardens below. At 23, she was the very picture of southern refinement, blonde hair neatly arranged, a simple pearl necklace at her throat, and a white sundress that her father, Judge William Halstead, had approved of. "Grace, come down for breakfast," her father's booming voice called from downstairs. She sighed, turning away from the window. Another day of the same routine in Magnolia Springs, the small Georgia town where her family had lived for generations. Judge Halstead ran not just the courtroom, but his household with the same iron fist. "Coming, Daddy," she called back, her voice sweet and obedient. The Halstead dining room was impressive with its antique furniture and silver place settings that had been in the family for generations. Judge Halstead sat at the head of the table, newspaper in hand, while Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper, poured his coffee. "Good morning, Daddy," Grace said, placing a kiss on her father's cheek before taking her seat. "Morning, sweetheart," he replied, without looking up from his paper. "Don't forget you're hosting the ladies' auxiliary meeting this afternoon." Grace nodded. "I've already gone over everything with Mrs. Peterson." "That's my girl," Judge Halstead said with approval. "Always on top of things." Grace had been his girl since her mother died when she was 12. Since then, she'd stepped into the role of the lady of the house, hosting events, attending church functions, and being the perfect daughter. She never complained, even though deep inside she felt something was missing. "Oh, and the new gardener starts today," her father mentioned casually. "Name's Reed. Came highly recommended by the Montgomerys." "That's nice," Grace replied automatically, though she wasn't really listening. Her mind was already going through the list of tasks for the day, all responsibilities that filled her time, but not her heart. Later that morning, Grace walked through the garden to check that everything was perfect for the afternoon tea. The roses needed to be just right, the hedges perfectly trimmed. Her father expected nothing less. As she rounded the corner near the stone fountain, she saw him. A tall man with broad shoulders kneeling beside the rose bushes. His hands moved with gentle precision as he pruned the branches. Grace paused, watching him work. There was something captivating about the way he handled the plants, with care and respect. "You must be Mr. Reed," she said, approaching him. He stood quickly, turning to face her. His eyes, deep brown and thoughtful, met hers for a brief moment before he looked down respectfully. "Yes, ma'am. Langston Reed," he replied, his voice deep and smooth. "I'm Grace Halstead," she said, extending her hand without thinking. Langston hesitated, before shaking it briefly. His hand was warm and calloused from work, but his touch was gentle. "I know who you are, Miss Halstead," he said. "Your father pointed you out when he hired me." Grace felt a strange flutter in her chest. "Well, welcome to Oakwood. I hope you'll be happy here." "Thank you, Mom," he replied. "These are beautiful roses. Whoever cared for them before had a real gift." "That was Mr. Jenkins," Grace said. "He retired last month, after 40 years. "Big shoes to fill," Langston commented, turning back to the roses. "How you seem to know what you're doing," Grace observed, noticing how healthy the plants looked despite it being early in the season. Langston smiled slightly. "Plants are honest. They respond to care and attention. Give them what they need, and they'll reward you." There was something in the way he spoke that made Grace want to continue the conversation, but Mrs. Peterson was calling from the porch, reminding her about the preparations for the tea. "I should go," Grace said reluctantly. "It was nice meeting you, Mr. Reed." "Langston," he corrected her gently. "Just Langston is fine." "Langston," she repeated, smiling. "I'm Grace." As she walked away, Grace felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she was curious about someone new, someone different. The ladies' auxiliary meeting dragged on for hours, these same women discussing the same topics, church fundraisers, who was getting married, whose children were causing trouble. Grace played the perfect hostess, but her mind kept drifting to the garden and the new gardener with the gentle hands. That evening after dinner, Grace excused herself early, claiming a headache. Instead of going to her room, she slipped out to the garden. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, casting a warm glow W over the flowers. To her surprise, Langston was still there, working on the hedges near the magnolia tree. "You work late," she commented, approaching him. He turned, seeming startled to see her. "Miss Halstead, I didn't expect anyone to be out here." "Grace," she reminded him, "and I needed some fresh air. My father's hosting the town councilman for brandy and cigars." Langston nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Not a fan of cigar smoke?" "Not a fan of the conversation," Grace admitted with a small laugh. "Politics and complaints about those troublemakers stirring up change." Something flickered in Langston's eyes, but he remained silent. "I'm sorry," Grace said quickly. "I shouldn't be talking about my father like that." "Everyone needs someone to talk to," Langston said simply. He gestured to the bench near the fountain. "Would you like to sit? You look tired." Grace hesitated only a moment before sitting down. Langston remained standing, maintaining a respectful distance. "Tell me about these roses," Grace said, nodding toward the bushes he'd been tending earlier. "You seem to really care about them." Langston's face softened. "My grandmother grew roses. She taught me everything I know about gardening, said plants have souls just like people do." "That's beautiful," Grace murmured. "Did she teach you to be a gardener?" "She taught me to love growing things," Langston corrected gently. "Being a gardener just lets me do that and make a living." "What would you do if you could do anything?" Grace asked, genuinely curious. Langston looked surprised by the question. "I'd have my own nursery, grow plants that heal, medicinal herbs, flowers, trees, maybe teach others to do the same." "That sounds wonderful," Grace said sincerely. They talked until the sky darkened completely, Langston sharing stories of peel ants and their properties, Grace listening with growing fascination. When the lights came on in the study, Grace knew her father's meeting was ending. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "My father wouldn't—" She trailed off. "Understand?" Langston finished for her. "I know, Miss Halstead." "Grace," she insisted once more, "will you be here tomorrow?" "Every day except Sundays," he replied with a small smile. Grace returned to the house, feeling lighter than she had in years. For the first time, she'd had a conversation that wasn't scripted by societal expectations or her father's approval. Over the next few weeks, Grace found herself drawn to the garden more and more. She'd bring a book and sit on the bench near where Langston worked. Sometimes they'd talk. Other times they'd simply exist in comfortable silence. He never overstepped, always maintaining a respectful distance, but Grace could feel something growing between them, fragile and undefined. One afternoon, Grace brought him a glass of iced tea. Their fingers brushed as she handed it to him, and she felt a jolt of electricity run through her. "Thank you," Langston said softly, his eyes meeting hers. "You're welcome," she replied, not moving away. "I was wondering if you could teach me about the roses. I've lived with them my whole life but never really understood them." Langston's face lit up. "I'd be happy to." He showed her how to check the soil, how to prune correctly, how to spot the early signs of disease. His passion was contagious, and Grace found herself genuinely interested in learning. "You have a natural touch," he told her as she carefully cut away a damaged stem. "Gentle but firm, just what they need." Grace felt herself blush at his words. No one had ever spoken to her this way, as if she had value beyond her social graces and prit-why appearance. "My father says I'm too soft," she admitted, "that I need to be tougher to survive in this world." Langston was quiet for a moment. "There's strength in gentleness, Grace. Don't let anyone tell you different." Their afternoon garden lessons became a routine. Grace learned about more than just flowers. She learned about Langston too. How he'd put himself through school working at nurseries. How he wrote poetry in the evenings. How he dreamed of a world where people were judged by their character, not the color of their skin. "It's a beautiful dream," Grace told him one day as they sat by the fountain. "Do you think it will ever come true?" "I have to believe it will," Langston replied. Otherwise, what's the point of going on? Their conversations grew deeper, more personal. Grace found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, her dreams of traveling, of making a difference, of finding love based on mutual respect rather than social standing. You deserve all that and more, Langston told her sincerely. One afternoon, Judge Halstead came home early and found them in the garden. Grace was laughing at something Langston had said, their heads bent together over a rose bush. Grace, her father called sharply, come inside now. Grace jumped at his voice, immediately stepping away from Langston. Coming, Daddy, she replied automatically. In the study, her father paced back and forth, his face thunderous. What do you think you're doing, spending so much time with the gardener? He demanded. He's teaching me about the roses, Grace explained, trying to keep her voice steady. I didn't hire him to teach you anything, Judge Halstead snapped. I hired him to tend the grounds and keep his distance from my daughter. Daddy, we were just talking, Grace protested. I saw how he was looking at you. Her father said coldly, and how you were looking at him. It stops now, Grace. You have a position to maintain in this town. I won't have people talking. People will always talk, Grace replied, feeling a spark of defiance. I haven't done anything wrong. You will not see him again, her father growled, slamming his hand on the desk. He works for us, that's all. Grace felt tears burning in her eyes. You can't tell me who to talk to. I'm 23 years old. As long as you live under my roof, you'll abide by my rules, Judge Halstead declared. I've already spoken to Jonathan Miller about courting you. He's from a good family, has excellent prospects. That's the kind of man you should be spending time with. Jonathan Miller is arrogant and boring, Grace said, her voice rising. And I'm not interested in him. Her father's expression hardened. You'll have dinner with him tomorrow night, and you'll be pleasant and charming, and I'll be telling Reed to focus on the far end of the property from now on. Grace left the study in tears. For the first time in her life, she felt trapped in the beautiful home that had always been her sanctuary. She went to her bedroom window and looked out at the garden, now bathed in twilight shadows. Langston was gone, but she could still feel his presence among the roses. That night, after the house had gone qui-tea, Grace made a decision. She changed into a simple dress, let her hair down from its usual neat arrangement, and opened her bedroom window. The trellis outside had been there since she was a child, though she'd never dared use it before. Carefully, she climbed down, her heart pounding with fear and excitement. The night air was warm against her skin as her bare feet touched the soft grass. She wasn't sure if Langston would be there. He didn't live on the property, but something told her to check the garden, near the magnolia tree where they often talked. As she rounded the corner, she saw him sitting on the bench by the fountain, his head bowed as if in deep thought. He looked up as she approached, surprise and concern crossing his face. Grace, what are you doing out here? He asked, standing quickly. I had to see you, she said, her voice trembling slightly. My father. He told me I couldn't talk to you anymore. Langston's expression grew serious. He spoke to me too, said I should keep to the back gardens from now on. I'm sorry, Grace whispered, moving closer to him. He doesn't understand. What is there to understand, Grace? Langston asked gently. I'm just the gardener. No, she said firmly, reaching for his hand. You're so much more than that. To me, you are. Langston looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face, in the moor, and light. His eyes were deep and full of emotion. This is dangerous, he warned, though he didn't pull away. Your father is a powerful man. I don't care, Grace replied. For the first time in my life, I'm making my own choice, and I choose to be here, with you. They sat together by the fountain, talking in hushed voices. Langston told her about his childhood, about the struggles his family had faced, about his dreams for a better future. Grace listened, her heart opening more with every word. As the night grew later, they knew they had to part. Grace reluctantly stood to go back to her room. Will you meet me tomorrow night? She asked, hope in her voice. Langston hesitated. Are you sure this is what you want? There could be consequences. I've never been more sure of anything, Grace answered honestly. He nodded slowly. Then I'll be here. Same time by the fountain. As Grace climbed back up the tree leaves to her room, she felt different, alive, awakened. For the first time, she was following her heart instead of her father's rules. and it felt like freedom. The next day passed in a blur. Grace went through the motions of her usual activities, but her mind was elsewhere, in the garden with Langston. She avoided looking out the windows, afraid her face would betray her feelings if she caught sight of him working among the roses. That evening, she was forced to have dinner with Jonathan Miller, a lawyer from her father's firm. He talked endlessly about himself, his cases, his new car. Grace smiled and nodded, playing the role she'd been assigned, but inside she was counting the minutes until she could escape. "I was thinking we could attend the country club dance together next weekend," Jonathan said as he walked her to the door after dinner. "I'll have to check my schedule," Grace replied vaguely. "Good night, Jonathan." Her father gave her an approving nod as she headed upstairs. "Jonathan is quite taken with you," he commented. "I knew you two would hit it off." Grace didn't bother to correct him. Her mind was already in the garden, waiting for midnight when she could slip away. That night became the first of many secret meetings. Every night, once the estate was asleep, Grace would climb down the trellis, and Langston would be waiting by the fountain under the magnolia tree. Sometimes they talked for hours, sharing dreams and fears. Sometimes they simply sat together, watching the stars and enjoying the peace of the garden at midnight. One night, about 2 weeks into their secret meetings, Langston brought her a gift, a small book of poetry. "I want you to have this," he said softly, placing it in her hands. "These words say things I'm not brave enough to say myself." Grace opened the book, finding passages marked with small slips of paper. She read one silently. "In a world that told us no, our hearts whispered yes. Against all reason, against all rules, we found each other." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You're beautiful," Langston replied, his voice low and sincere. "Inside and out, Grace. You shine brighter than anyone I've ever known." Grace felt her heart swell with emotion. Slowly she leaned toward him, and he toward her. Their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss that quickly deepened into something more powerful. His hand came up to cradle her face, and she felt herself melting into his embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Langston rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I've wanted to do that since the first day I saw you," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" Grace asked, her fingers tracing the line of Hayes' jaw. "Because once we crossed that line, there was no going back," he replied honestly. "And I was afraid of what it would mean for you." Grace kissed him again softly. "Some things are worth the risk, Langston. You taught me that." As June turned to July, their midnight meetings became more passionate. They shared not just conversation, but embraces, kisses, and whispered promises. Grace knew she was falling in love, and the feeling both terrified and exhilarated her. One night, as they sat entwined on the bench, a beam of light suddenly swept across the hedges. They sprang apart, hearts racing. "Someone's out there," Langston whispered, pulling Grace behind the magnolia tree. They watched as one of the new security guards her father had hired walked along the perimeter of the garden, flashlight in hand. He paused near the fountain, shining his light directly at the spot where they had been sitting moments before. "He's hired people to watch the grounds," Grace realized with dismay. "He must suspect something." When the guard finally moved on, Langston turned to her, his expression serious. "This is getting more dangerous, Grace. If we are caught—" "We won't be," she insisted. "We'll be more careful." But Langston's face remained troubled. "Your father has power in this town. He could take everything from you. Your home, your security, your place in society. And me? I have nothing to offer except this," he gestured between them. These stolen moments. Grace took his face in her hands, her eyes fierce with determination. "Then give me this," she said, her voice trembling, "because it's the only thing in my life that feels real." Their kiss that night was desperate, filled with both passion and fear. As July stretched on, the risk of discovery grew. The guards patrolled more frequently. Whispers began in town about the judge's daughter spending too much time in the garden. Grace's father watched her more closely, questioning her tired eyes and distracted manner. Still, they continued to meet. Each night was precious, a gift they gave each other despite the growing danger. They talked about running away together, starting fresh somewhere new, but both knew the reality they faced. Langston had little money saved, and Grace had never lived independently. "We'll find a way," Grace promised, curled against his chest as they sat hidden behind the hedges. "I don't care if I have to work, I don't care if we're poor, I just want to be with you." Langston stroked her hair, his touch reverent. "You say that now, but you've never known hardship, Grace. I don't want to be the reason you suffer." "The only suffering I know is when we're apart," she replied honestly. As July turned to August, the tension in the Halstead house grew unbearable. Judge Halstead announced at dinner that he had accepted Jonathan Miller's request to court Grace officially. "The Millers will be joining us for dinner on Friday," he informed her. "Jonathan has something important he wants to ask you." Grace felt her blood run cold. "Daddy, I don't want to marry Jonathan." Her father's expression hardened. "You barely know the boy. Give him a chance." "I don't love him," Grace insisted. "Love grows with time," her father replied dismissively. "Your mother and I had an arranged match, and we were very happy together." That night, Grace met Langston with tears streaming down her face. She told him about Jonathan's intentions, about her father's expectation ease. "He wants me to marry a man I don't love," she sobbed against Langston's chest. "A man who sees me as nothing more than a pretty ornament for his arm." Langston held her tightly, his own heart breaking. "What do you want, Grace? Tell me what you want." "You," she answered without hesitation. "I want you, Langston. I love you." It was the first time either of them had said those words aloud. Langston pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "I love you too," he said softly. "More than I ever thought possible. But loving you means wanting what's best for you." "You are what's best for me," Grace insisted. Langston kissed her deeply, then whispered against her lips, "Give me time to figure something out. A few days, that's all I ask." Grace nodded, trusting him completely. "I'll wait for you. Always." The next night, Langston seemed distracted, his mind clearly working on a plan. "I have some money saved, Dee," he told her. "Not much, but enough to get us to Atlanta, maybe. I have a cousin there who might help us get settled." "When?" Grace asked eagerly. "Soon," he promised. "I need to make arrangements, make sure we have somewhere safe to go." They spent the next few nights finalizing their plan. They would leave on Saturday night after the dinner with the Millers. Grace would pack only what she could carry in a small bag. Langston would have a car waiting at the end of the property. They would drive through the night, reaching Atlanta by morning. "Are you sure about this?" Langston asked her on Friday night, their last meeting before the planned escape. "Once we go, there's no coming back. Your father won't forgive this." "I've never been more sure," Grace replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You are my choice, Langston, my future." Their kiss that night was filled with promise and hope. As they parted, Langston held her close one last time. "Tomorrow night," he whispered, "our new beginning." Grace climbed back to her room, her heart full of dreams for their future together. For the first time she felt truly free, free to love, free to choose, free to be herself. Little did she know that as she slept peacefully dreaming of Langston, events were already in motion that would test their love in ways she could never have imagined. The dinner with the Miller family was excruciating for Grace. She sat at the elegantly set dining table, forcing smiles and small talk, while her mind remained focused on the night ahead. Jonathan Miller sat beside her, occasionally touching her arm or hand in a way that made her skin crawl. "You look especially beautiful tonight, Grace," he commented, his eyes roaming over her face and neck. "That blue brings out your eyes." "Thank you," she replied automatically, taking a sip of water to avoid further conversation. Across the table, Judge Halstead beamed with approval. He raised his wine glass in a toast. "To new beginnings and future unions," he announced, giving Jonathan a meaningful nod. Grace felt her stomach tighten. She knew what was coming but was powerless to stop it. After dessert, Jonathan cleared his throat and stood up. "I'd like to say something if I may," he announced to the table. Mrs. Miller clasped her hands together in anticipation while Judge Halstead sat back with a satisfied smile. Grace felt trapped, her escape plan with Langston still hours away. "Grace Halstead," Jonathan began, turning to face her. "We've known each other our whole lives. Our families have been friends for generations. I believe it's time we continued that tradition in the most meaningful way." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Grace felt the room spinning around her. "No," she whispered, but no one seemed to hear her. Jonathan got down on one knee beside her chair. "Grace, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The room fell silent, all eyes on Grace. She looked at the diamond ring sparkling in the box, then at Jonathan's expectant face, and finally at her father, whose expression clearly demanded only one answer. I need some air," Grace managed to say, rising quickly from her chair. "Excuse me." She hurried from the dining room, ignoring her father's sharp call of her name. Once in the hallway, she ran to the back door and out into the garden, gasping for breath. The night air was heavy with humidity, the scent of roses hanging thick in the darkness. Grace moved instinctively toward the fountain, their meeting spot, though she knew Langston wouldn't be there until midnight. "Grace!" Her father's voice boomed from the porch. She turned to see him striding toward her, anger evident in every step. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, grabbing her arm. "You've embarrassed us in front of the Millers. Jonathan is waiting with a ring, for heaven's sake." "I can't marry him, Daddy," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't love him." "Love?" Judge Halstead scoffed. "What does a girl your age know about love? Marriage is about suitable matches, about maintaining our posit-ion in society." "No," Grace argued, pulling her arm free. "Marriage should be about love and respect. What you're asking me to do isn't fair." Her father's face darkened. "Life isn't fair, Grace. Your mother and I taught you better than this childish behavior." "Mom would have wanted me to be happy," Grace insisted. Judge Halstead's expression softened slightly at the mention of his late wife. "Elizabeth wanted what was best for you. Security, respect, a good home. That's what Jonathan can provide." "But it's not what I want," Grace replied, her voice steadying despite her tears. "I want to make my own choices, live my own life." "This isn't about you throwing a tantrum because you can't have your way," her father said firmly. "This is about your future. Now you will come back inside, apologize for your behavior, and accept Jonathan's proposal." "And if I don't?" Grace challenged, standing straighter. Judge Halstead's jaw tightened. "Then you are no longer welcome in this house." The words hung in the night air between them. Grace felt a strange calm settle over her. Her father had just given her the final push she needed. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said quietly. Her father's eyes widened, realizing his ultimatum had backfired. "Grace, be reasonable. You have nowhere to go, no means to support yourself." "I'll figure it out," she replied, turning away from him. "Please tell the Millers I'm sorry for the inconvenience." "Grace Elizabeth Halstead," her father called after her as she walked away. "Don't you dare walk away from me." But she kept walking, her steps quickening as she headed toward the house, not to return to the dinner, but to pack her bag. Her plan with Langston wasn't supposed to happen until midnight, but circumstances had changed. She needed to leave now. Inside, she rushed up the back quay stairs to avoid the dining room. In her bedroom, she quickly grabbed the small bag she had hidden in her closet. She had already packed essentials, some clothes, a few keepsakes, and the money she'd been saving from birthday gifts over the years. A soft knock at her door made her freeze. "Grace," it was Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper. "Your father sent me to check on you. The Millers are leaving." "Tell him I'm not feeling well," Grace replied, shoving the bag under her bed. "I'll speak with him in the morning." There was a pause. "Are you all right, dear? You seemed upset at dinner." Grace had always liked Mrs. Peterson, who had been more of a mother figure to her than a housekeeper. For a moment, she considered telling her the truth, but decided against it. The fewer people who knew, the better. "I'm fine, just a headache," she lied. "I need to rest." "All right, dear, I'll let your father know." Grace waited until she heard Mrs. Peterson's footsteps recede down the hallway. Then she pulled out the bag again and added a few more items, a photo of her mother, her favorite book, and the poetry book Langston had given her. She glanced at the clock. It was only 9:30 p.m. Langston wouldn't be at their meeting spot for hours, and she had no way to contact him. She would have to wait in the garden, hidden from view, until he arrived. Climbing down the trellis was more difficult with the bag slung over her shoulder, but Grace managed it carefully. The garden was dark now, only the silver light of a half moon illuminating the paths between the hedges. Grace made her way to their spot by the fountain, then thought better of it. Her father might come looking for her there. Instead, she moved deeper into the garden, to a small stone bench hidden behind a wall of climbing roses. It wasn't visible from the house, Maki, and at the perfect hiding spot. The minutes ticked by slowly. Grace could hear voices from inside the house, the Millers leaving, her father's voice rising and falling as he spoke to someone, probably making excuses for her behavior. She hugged her knees to her chest, wondering if she had made the right decision. Around 10:30 p.m. she heard the sound of footsteps on the garden path. Her heart leapt, thinking it might be Langston arriving early. Instead, she saw the beam of a flashlight sweeping across the hedges, one of the security guards. Grace pressed herself against the stone wall behind the bench, holding her breath as the light came closer. The guard paused just feet away from her hiding spot, his flashlight illuminating the roses that concealed her. After what felt like an eternity, he moved on, continuing his patrol around the property. Once he was gone, Grace released her breath. This was going to be more difficult than she had anticipated. Her father had increased security around the grounds, likely suspecting something was amiss with his daughter. As 11:00 p.m. approached, the back door of the house opened, and Judge Halstead stepped out onto the porch. Even from her hiding place, Grace could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the way he scanned the garden as if expecting to find her. "Grace," he called out, his voice carrying across the quiet night, "this childish behavior ends now. Come inside immediately." Grace remained hidden, not daring to move. After a few minutes, her father went back inside, slamming the door behind him. The minutes continued to crawl by. Grace checked her watch repeatedly, willing the time to pass faster. At 11:45 p.m., she decided to move closer to their meeting spot. Langston would be arriving soon, and she needed to intercept him before he went to the fountain, which might be watched. Moving carefully through the shadows, Grace made her way toward the edge of the property where they usually met. She stayed close to the hedges, out of sight of both the house and the patrolling guards. Finally, at midnight, she saw a figure approaching through the trees that lined the edge of the estate. Langston. His tall form was unmistakable, moving quietly through the darkness with purpose. Grace stepped out from behind a hedge, directly in his path. "Langston," she whispered urgently. He startled, then quickly moved to her side. "Grace, what's wrong? Why aren't you at the fountain?" "Everything's gone wrong," she explained quickly, her words tumbling out. "Jonathan proposed at dinner. I refused. My father and I had a huge fight. He told me if I didn't accept the proposal, I wasn't welcome in his house anymore." Langston's expression grew serious as he processed her words. "So you're leaving? Now? Tonight?" "I have to," Grace replied, clutching her bag tighter. "I can't go back there, Langston. I won't marry Jonathan." He nodded, taking her hand. "Then we'll go now. My car is parked just beyond those trees. I've made arrangements with my cousin in Atlanta. She's expecting us, but not until tomorrow. I'm sorry to rush our plans," Grace said, squeezing his hand. "Don't be," Langston assured her. "The timing doesn't matter. All that matters is that we're together." They moved quietly toward the tree line, staying in the shadows. Grace's heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of fear and exhilaration making her dizzy. They had almost reached the edge of the property when a flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing directly on them. "Stop right there!" a gruff voice commanded. Langston pulled Grace behind him protectively as the security guard approached, flashlight in one hand, radio in the other. "Mr. Reed," the guard said, recognizing Langston, "what are you doing on the property at this hour? And Miss Halstead, your father's been looking everywhere for you." "Please," Grace begged, stepping forward, "just let us go. Tell him you didn't see us." The guard looked uncomfortable. "I can't do that, Miss Halstead. Your father pays my salary. He instructed us to keep an eye out for you specifically." "How much?" Langston asked suddenly. "How much would it take for you to forget you saw us?" The guard hesitated, clearly tempted, but before he could respond, his radio crackled to life. "Jackson, report. Have you found her?" Judge Halstead's voice came through the static. The guard looked at Grace, then at Langston, indecision clear on his face. Finally, he raised the radio to his lips. "No sign of her yet, sir. Still checking the East Gardens." Grace felt a surge of hope. The guard was giving them a chance. "Thank you," she whispered. The guard nodded curtly. "You have 5 minutes before I circle back this way. Make it count." Langston took Grace's hand again and they ran toward the trees. Beyond them, parked on a dirt road that ran along the estate's boundary, was Langston's old blue pickup truck. "Get in," he urged, helping her into the passenger seat before running around to the driver's side. The engine started with a rumble that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. Langston didn't turn on the headlights until they were well down the dirt road, away from Oakwood Estate. "We made it," Grace breathed, looking back at the receding silhouette of her childhood home. "Not yet," Langston cautioned. "Your father has friends in law enforcement. Once he realizes you're gone, he might try to find us." They drove in tense silence for several miles, taking back roads instead of the main highway. Grace watched the familiar landmarks of Magnolia Springs disappear behind them, a mixture of sadness and liberation washing over her. "Are you all right?" Langston asked, reaching for her hand across the seat. "Yes," Grace replied honestly. "Scared, but free." Langston smiled, his face illuminated briefly by passing headlights. "We'll be in Atlanta by morning. My cousin Delia has a spare room. It's small, but it's ours until we figure out next steps." "I don't care where we go as long as we're together," Grace said, meaning every word. They drove through the night, stopping only once for gas at a small station outside town. As dawn began to break, the Atlanta skyline appeared in the distance, a promise of new beginnings. Delia Reed lived in a modest apartment on the city's south side. She greeted them at the door with concerned eyes but a warm smile. "You're early," she said, ushering them inside. "I wasn't expecting you until tonight." "We had to change plans," Langston explained, setting Dewdubby in Grace's bag. "Delia, this is Grace. Grace, my cousin Delia." Delia was a striking woman in her 30s, with the same thoughtful eyes as Langston. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital and had offered them shelter without hesitation when Langston had called. "It's nice to meet you," Grace said, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after the night's events. "Likewise," Delia replied, her gaze appraising but not unkind. "Langston's told me about you. You've got courage, leaving everything behind like this." "I didn't leave everything," Grace said, looking at Langston. "Just the things that weren't important." Delia showed them to a small spare room with a double bed and simple furnishings. "It's not much," she apologized. "It's perfect," Grace assured her. "Thank you for taking us in." "Family helps family," Delia replied simply. "And anyone Langston loves is family to me." Left alone, Gracie and Langston sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. "We did it," Grace said, a mixture of disbelief and joy in her voice. "We're actually here." Langston took her hands in his. "Grace, I need to ask you one more time. Are you sure about this? Your life will be very different now. No more big house, fancy dinners, social standing." "I'm sure about you," Grace replied firmly. "Everything else is just stuff. I can learn to live without it." Langston pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I'll spend every day trying to make sure you never regret this decision." "I love you too," Grace replied, feeling safer in his embrace than she ever had in her father's grand house. That afternoon, after they had rested, Delia returned from her shift at the hospital with news. "Your father has been calling around," she told Grace gravely. "A friend of mine works as a receptionist at the police station. Judge Halstead filed a missing persons report this morning, claiming his daughter was coerced into leaving by an employee." Grace felt a chill run through her. "That's not true. I chose to leave." "It doesn't matter," Langston said quietly. "Your father is a judge. His word carries weight." "What do we do?" Grace asked, fear creeping back into her voice. Delia sat down across from them. "You're both adults, so legally, he can't force you to go back, but he can make things difficult. My suggestion? Lay low for a while. Stay here until things cool down. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. Grace and Langston remained in Delia's apartment, venturing out only for essentials. They watched the local news anxiously, half expecting to see Grace's face broadcast as a missing person. On the third day, while Delia was at work, the PH1 rang. Langston answered it cautiously. "Hello?" he said, his body tense. Grace watched as his expression changed from wariness to shock. After a brief conversation, he hung up, turning to her with troubled eyes. "That was my mother," he explained. "Judge Halstead came to our house this morning with the sheriff. They questioned my parents about my whereabouts. When my parents wouldn't tell them anything, the sheriff mentioned potential charges for aiding and abetting." "They can't do that," Grace exclaimed, outraged. "They can try," Langston replied grimly. "Your father is determined to find you, Grace, and to punish me." The reality of their situation hit Grace fully for the first time. It wasn't just about her freedom or their love anymore. Langston's family could suffer because of her decision. "Maybe I should go back," she said quietly. "Just long enough to clear your name. I could tell them I left on my own, that you had nothing to do with it." "No," Langston said firmly. "If you go back, your father will never let you leave again. He'll make sure of it." "But your family—" "My family is strong," Langston assured her. "They've faced worse than this. They know the truth, and that's what matters." That night, as they lay in the small bed in Delia's spare room, Grace couldn't sleep. The weight of consequences pressed down on her. She had been naive to think they could simply run away and start fresh, that her father would let her go so easily. "Langston," she whispered into the darkness, "are you awake?" "Yes," he replied, his voice low. "What's wrong?" "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not for myself, but for you, for your family. What if my father keeps pushing? What if he tries to charge you with something serious?" Langston turned to face her, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "We'll figure it out, Grace, together." "But what if—" He silenced her with a gentle kiss. "No more what-ifs tonight. Let's just be here. Now. Together." Grace tried to take comfort in his words, in his presence beside her, but as she finally drifted off to sleep, her dreams were troubled by images of Langston being taken away in handcuffs, of his family suffering because of her. The next morning, Delia came home from her night shift with a newspaper. She placed it on the kit, Chen table wordlessly, her expression grim. Grace picked it up and gasped. There on the front page of the local section was her photograph, alongside a headline, "Judge's daughter missing, foul play suspected." The article quoted her father extensively, painting a picture of a vulnerable young woman who had been manipulated and possibly abducted by a gardener with questionable intentions. It mentioned Langston by name, implying criminal intent without directly accusing him. "This is horrible," Grace said, her hands shaking as she read. "These are all lies." "It's character assassination," Delia agreed, her voice tight with anger. "They're trying to turn public opinion against Langston before they even find you." "I need to do something," Grace insisted. "I can't let them destroy his reputation like this." Langston, who had been reading over her shoulder, placed a steadying hand on her arm. "We need to be smart about this, Grace. Reacting emotionally is exactly what your father wants." "So what do we do?" she demanded, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. "We get legal advice," Delia suggested. "I have a friend who works with a civil rights attorney. Maybe they can help." Later that day, Delia brought home Eric Washington, a young lawyer who specialized in cases involving civil liberties. He listened carefully as Grace and Langston explained their situation. "Let me be clear about the facts," Eric said when they had finished. "You left your father's house voluntarily, correct? No coercion, no manipulation?" "Absolutely," Grace confirmed. "It was my decision. Langston even tried to make sure I understood what I was giving up." Eric nodded, making notes. "And you're both adults over 21 with the legal right to make your own decisions." "Yes," they both answered. "Then legally, your father doesn't have a leg to stand on," Eric assured them. "You have the right to leave home, to be with whomever you choose." The missing persons report is baseless since you aren't actually missing. You left willingly. But the newspaper article? Grace pressed. The implications about Langston? Eric's expression grew more serious. That's trickier. There's potential for a defamation case, but it would be difficult to prove and expensive to pursue. The article carefully avoided AA making direct accusations. So what's our best move? Langston asked. In my opinion, go public with your side of the story, Eric advised. Right now your father is controlling the narrative. You need to take it back. You mean like, talk to the press? Grace asked, uncertain. Exactly. Show the world that you're not a victim, that you made a choice based on love. It won't stop your father completely, but it will make it harder for him to paint Lan Justin as the villain. The idea terrified Grace. Her entire life she had been taught to avoid scandal, to present a perfect image to the world. Going public meant exposing not just her relationship with Langston, but her father's controlling behavior, the truth about her privileged but stifling upbringing. I don't know if I can do that, she admitted. You don't have to decide right now, Eric assured her. Think about it. But remember, the longer your father's version of events goes unchallenged, the more people will accept it as truth. After Eric left, Grace paced the small apartment, torn between fear and determination. Langston watched her, giving her space to process. Whatever you decide, I'll support you, he said finally. If you want to go public, we'll do it together. If not, we'll find another way. Grace stopped pacing and looked at him, really looked at the man who had risked everything to be with her. He deserved better than to have his name dragged through the mud, his character questioned because he had fallen in love with the wrong woman. We'll do it, she decided. We'll tell our story, the truth. The next day, with Eric's help, they arranged an interview with a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Andrea Martinez was known for her fair reporting and interest in social justice issues. She arrived at Delia's apartment that afternoon, recorder in hand. Thank you for trusting me with your story, Andrea said as they sat in Delia's small living room. I'd like to hear everything, from the beginning. Grace took a deep breath and started talking. She told Andrea about growing up under her father's strict control, about meeting Langston and finding in him a kindred spirit. She described their midnight meetings in the garden, their growing love, and her decision to leave rather than marry a man she didn't love. It wasn't an abduction or manipulation, Grace emphasized. It was my choice. The first real choice I've been allowed to make in my life. Langston spoke too, explaining his background, his dreams, and how falling in love with Grace had changed his life. I never intended to come between her and her family, he said honestly. But when I saw how unhappy she was, how trapped she felt, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Andrea asked thoughtful questions, taking detailed notes. This will run in tomorrow's paper, she promised as she left. Your side of the story, unfiltered. That night, Grace barely slept, anxiety about the article keeping her awake. By morning, she was exhausted, but determined to face whatever came next. Delia brought home the newspaper before going to bed after her night shift. There on the front page was a photo of Grace and Langston together, taken during the interview. The headline read, "Love Across Boundaries, Judge's Daughter Speaks Out." The article presented their story sympathetically, emphasizing Grace's agency in her decisions and Langston's respect for her choices. It questioned the missing persons report and the implications made against Langston, suggesting that Judge Halstead's actions were more about control than concern. It's good, Delia said after reading it. Humanizing. Makes it harder for your father to paint you as a victim. Grace felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Do you think it will make a difference? It already has, Langston said, pointing to the bottom of the article where it mentioned that the sheriff's office had dropped their investigation following Grace's public statement that she had left willingly. The relief was short-lived. That afternoon the phone rang. It was Eric. Judge Halstead is holding a press conference in an hour, he told them. You might want to watch. They gathered around Delia's small television, anxiety mounting as they waited. When Judge Halstead appeared on screen, Grace was shocked by his appearance. He looked older, tired, his usual commanding presence diminished. My daughter, Grace, has made her choices clear, he began, his voice strained. While I disagree with those choices and believe she has been influenced unduly, I recognize that she is an adult with the legal right to make her own decisions. Grace held her breath, hardly believing what she was hearing. I am withdrawing the missing persons report and any implications against Langston Reed, Judge Halstead continued. However, I want my daughter to know that these actions have consequences. As of today, she is disinherited. She will receive no financial support from me or access to family resources. The choice she has made comes at a CEOst. The press conference ended abruptly, with Judge Halstead refusing to take questions. Grace sat in stunned silence, processing his words. Are you okay? Langston asked, taking her hand. Grace nodded slowly. I expected worse, honestly. Being disinherited isn't a surprise. It's his way of maintaining control, Delia observed. He's trying to punish you, make you regret your decision. It won't work, Grace said firmly. Money and status aren't worth it. Giving up love and freedom. The days that followed were a strange mix of relief and new anxiety. The immediate threat of legal trouble had passed, but now they faced practical challenges. They couldn't stay with Delia indefinitely. They needed jobs, a place of their own, a plan for the future. Langston found work at a local plant nursery, his experience and knowledge of horticulture making him a valuable employee despite the recent publicity. Grace, who had never worked before, struggled more. Her education at expensive private schools hadn't prepared her for the realities of the job market. I don't have any marketable skills, she lamented one evening after another unsuccessful interview. All I know is how to host dinner parties and arrange flowers. That's not true, Langston argued. You're smart, adaptable, and a quick learner. You just need an opportunity. That opportunity came unexpectedly through Delia. One of her patients at the hospital was the owner of a small bookstore that needed help. Grace, with her love of literature and pleasant manner, was perfect for the job. The pay was modest, but combined with Langston's income, it was enough for them to start looking for a small apartment of their own. They found a one-bedroom place not far from Delia's, with just enough space for the basics. Moving day was both exciting and sobering. Their new home was a far cry from the luxury Grace had grown up with. The furniture was second-hand, the appliances outdated, the space limited, but as they arranged their few possessions, it began to feel like theirs. It's not much, Langston said that evening as they sat on their used sofa eating takeout dinner. Not what you're used to. It's perfect, Grace replied, leaning against him, because it's ours. We built this together. Their life settled into a new routine. Work during the day, simple pleasures in the evening, cooking together, reading, talking about their dreams. They made friends, mostly through Delia and Langston's colleagues at the nursery, people who accepted them as they were without judgment or preconceptions. One Saturday, about 2 months after they had left Magnolia Springs, Grace received a letter. The return address was Oakwood Estate, but the handwriting was Mrs. Peterson's, not her F. Athers. With trembling fingers, Grace opened it. Inside was a brief note from the housekeeper, expressing hope that Grace was well and happy. Along with the note was a small package, the silver locket that had belonged to Grace's mother, which she had left behind in her hasty departure. She sent me Mom's locket, Grace whispered, showing Langston. Mrs. Peterson must have taken it from my jewelry box before my father could get rid of it. She cares about you, Langston observed, helping Grace fasten the necklace around her throat. I miss her, Grace admitted, and sometimes I even miss my father. Is that strange? Not at all, Langston assured her. He's still your father despite everything. The letter prompted Grace to reflect on what she had left behind, not just material comforts, but relationships, connections, the familiar rhythm of her old life. There were moments usually when she was tired, or facing a new challenge when doubt crept in. Had she made the right choice? Could she really build a new life so different from everything she had known? But then she would look at Langston, and those doubts would fade. His love, his support, his belief in her made every struggle worthwhile. One night, as they lay in bed in their small apartment, Grace voiced a question that had been on her mind. Do you ever regret it? Getting involved with me, having to leave your job, facing all this drama? Langston propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with serious eyes. Not for a single moment. You're worth everything, Grace, every challenge, every sacrifice. Even though I brought you nothing but trouble, she pressed. You brought me love, he corrected gently. Everything else is just noise. As summer turned to fall, they continued to build their life together. Grace advanced at the bookstore, taking on more responsibility and earning a small raise. Langston's knowledge and work ethic impressed his employers at the nursery, leading to a promotion to assistant manager. They started saving for the future, dreams of Langston's own nursery someday, of a small house with a garden where they could grow their own roses. It wasn't the life Grace had been raised to expect, but it was rich in ways her privileged upbringing had never been. Then, on a crispy October evening, as they walked home from dinner at a small neighborhood restaurant, Langston suddenly stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. "What's wrong?" Grace asked, concerned by his serious expression. Langston took both her hands in his. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life, despite all the challenges." Grace felt her heart begin to race as he continued. "I don't have much to offer you yet. No fancy house, no security like you had before, but I have all my love, all my dreams, all my future. And Dee, I want to share it with you. Officially." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring. It wasn't a diamond like Jonathan Miller's had been. It was a simple band with a small pearl, modest but beautiful. "Grace Halstead, will you marry me?" Langston asked, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Grace felt tears well up, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." Langston slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a deep kiss right there on the sidewalk, oblivious to passers-by. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling through tears. "It was my grandmother's," Langston explained, nodding at the ring. "She gave it to me before she died, said to save it for the one. I've been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment." "It's perfect," Grace assured him, admiring how the pearl caught the light of the street lamps. "More precious than any diamond." They walked home hand in hand, making plans and sharing dreams. A small wedding with Delia and their new friends. A future built on love and respect rather than social expectations. That night, as Grace lay awake beside her sleeping fiancé, she realized how far she had come from the obedient daughter who had never questioned her father's rules. She had lost much: privilege, security, family connections. But she had gained so much more: independence, authentic relationships, and a love that respected her choices and valued her for herself, not her social standing. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt. Her father's shadow still loomed large in her mind, and the wounds of their separation remained unhealed. But with Langston beside her, Grace felt ready to face whatever came next. Outside their apartment window, the moon cast silver light across the city, not unlike the moonlight that had illuminated their secret meetings in the garden at Oakwood Estate. Grace smiled at the memory. Their love had begun in shadows and secrets, but now it flourished in the open, honest, and true. The next morning, Grace made a decision. She sat down at their small kitchen table and began to write a letter to her father, not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet, but opening a door that had been slammed shut that summer night in the garden. "I'm happy, Daddy," she wrote. "I've found love and purpose. I hope someday you can understand and accept my choices. Until then, know that I'm well and that I still love you, despite everything." She didn't know if he would respond or even read her words, but taking this step felt right. It was time to close one chapter and begin another, on her own terms. Winter in Atlanta was milder than in many parts of the country, but to Grace, who had spent her entire life in the Deep South, it felt bitterly cold. She pulled her worn coat tighter around her as she walked home from the bookstore, her breath forming small clouds in the December air. Their small apartment welcomed her with warmth when she finally arrived, stomping her feet to restore circulation. Langston was already home, preparing dinner in their tiny kitchen. "Something smells wonderful," Grace commented, hanging up her coat and moving to kiss him hello. "My mother's gumbo recipe," Langston replied, stirring the pot on the stove. "Thought we could use something warm tonight." Grace wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. These simple domestic moments still filled her with wonder, the ease between them, the shared responsibilities, the feeling of building something together. "Mail came," Langston mentioned, nodding toward a small pile on the counter. "There's something from Magnolia Springs." Grace's heart skipped a beat. It had been 6 weeks since she'd sent the letter to her father, with no response. She had begun to accept that he might never acknowledge it, that the rift between them might be permanent. She picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. It wasn't from Judge Halstead. The return address belonged to Mrs. Peterson, the housekeeper. Inside was a Christmas card with a brief note. "Dear Grace, I hope this finds you well. Your father received your letter. He didn't say much, but he keeps it in his desk drawer and I've seen him reading it more than once. Give him time. Enclosed is a small Christmas gift from me. I miss your smile around the house. With love, Mrs. Peterson." Wrapped in tissue paper was a small ornament, a porcelain rose that Grace recognized from her mother's collection. Tears welled in her eyes as she showed it to Langston. "She's been like a mother to me since Mom died," Grace explained. "And it means something that she would send this particular ornament. My mother loved these little porcelain flowers." Langston held her close, understanding the complex emotions stirring within her. "Maybe it's a sign that not all bridges are burned," he suggested gently. That evening, as they ate dinner at their small table, Grace found herself thinking about Christmas at Oakwood Estate, the enormous tree in the foyer decorated with antique ornaments, the carefully wrapped presents that were always exactly what she had asked for, though rarely what she truly wanted. "What's Christmas like in your family?" she asked Langston, realizing she had never experienced the holiday through his eyes. His face lit up. "Loud," he said with a laugh. "My mum's side of the family all come together. Aunts, uncles, cousins, too many people in a too small house. Everyone brings food, there's music, dancing, it lasts all day and half the night." "It sounds wonderful," Grace said wistfully. "You'll see for yourself," Langston replied. "Mom called yesterday. She invited us for Christmas. The whole family wants to meet you." Grace felt a flutter of nervousness. "All of them? At once?" "Don't worry," Langston assured her, reaching for her hand across the table. "They're going to love you. Even after everything that happened. The newspaper articles, your parents being questioned by the sheriff." "Especially after all that," Langston said firmly. "You stood up for us, Grace. You chose love over privilege. My family respects that kind of courage." 2 weeks later, they boarded a bus for the small town of Cedar Grove, about an hour outside of Atlanta. Langston's parents had moved there after his father retired from factory work, seeking a quieter life closer to relatives. As the bus rolled through the countryside, Grace felt her anxiety mounting. Meeting Langston's family was an important step, one that highlighted the permanence of the choice she had made. There would be no going back to her old life, not completely. This was her future now. The Reed family home was a modest one-story house with a wide front porch and cheerful Christmas lights strung along the eaves. As soon as they stepped off the bus at the small town station, Langston's mother spotted them and rushed forward. "My boy!" she exclaimed, wrapping Langston in a fierce hug before turning to Grace. "And you must be the brave girl who stole my son's heart." Before Grace could respond, she found herself enveloped in a warm embrace. Mabel Reed was a small woman, with Langston's same thoughtful eyes and a smile that immediately put Grace at ease. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Reed," Grace said when she was released from the hug. "None of that Mrs. Reed business," Mabel insisted. "You call me Mabel, or Mama if you prefer. You're family now." Grace felt tears prick her eyes at the immediate acceptance. Langston squeezed her hand reassuringly as his father approached. Joseph Reed was tall like his son, with a dignified bearing despite his worn hands. "Welcome, Grace," he said simply, his handshake firm but gentle. "Our home is yours." The Reed house was already bustling with activity when they arrived. Aunts were in the kitchen preparing food, uncles were watching a football game on TV. Cousins of all ages ran through the rooms playing games and helping with decorations. Grace was introduced to so many people that she quickly lost track of names and relationships, but everyone welcomed her warmly, many expressing admiration for how she had stood up to her father. "Takes guts to walk away from that kind of privilege," Langston's Uncle Marcus commented. "Most folks wouldn't have the strength." "I had something worth walking away for," Grace replied, glancing at Langston across the room where he was deep in conversation with a group of cousins. That night, after a lively dinner around tables pushed together to accommodate the extended family, Marbell showed Grace and Langston to his childhood bedroom. "We'll sleep in the living room," Langston protested. "You and Dad take your bed." "Nonsense," Mabel replied firmly. "You two are engaged now. The couch pulls out just fine for us old folks." Once they were alone, Grace sat on the edge of the narrow bed, looking around at the room that had shaped Langston's youth. Books lined a small shelf, novels, poetry, and many volumes about plants and horticulture. On the desk sat trophies from high school track meets. Photos on the wall showed a younger Langston with friends and family. "It's strange," Grace commented, as Langston sat beside her. "Seeing pieces of your life before me." "Good strange or bad strange?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Good," she decided, "like filling in missing pieces of a puzzle. I'm seeing the boy who became the man I love." Langston smiled, pulling her close. "And tomorrow you'll hear all the embarrassing stories my mother has been saving up to tell you." True to his prediction, Christmas Day was filled with family stories, many at Langston's expense. Grace delighted in learning about his childhood antics, his teenage dreams, the path that had led him to become the man she knew. The Reed family tradition was to open gifts after Christmas dinner, gathered in the crowded living room. Grace had worried about what to bring, their budget being tight, but Langston had assured her that homemade gifts were the family custom. Together they had created small potted herb gardens for each household, with handwritten care instructions and recipes that used the herbs. The gifts were received with genuine appreciation, especially by Mabel, who immediately began planning where to place hers for maximum sunlight. When it came time for Grace to open her gifts, she was overwhelmed by the family's generosity. Handmade scarves, home-baked cookies, a beautiful quilt that Mabel had been working on since Langston first told her about Grace. "One more," Langston said, handing her a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature garden trowel. "To remind you of where we began," Langston explained as he fastened it around her wrist. "It's perfect," Grace whispered, "kissy." Nung him despite the good-natured teasing from his cousins. Later, as the family gathered around the piano for Christmas carols, Grace found herself seated next to Joseph Reed. Langston's father had been quieter than most of the family, observing more than participating in the boisterous celebrations. "Langston tells me you're working at a bookstore," he commented during a lull in the music. Grace nodded. "It's not what I planned for my life, but I enjoy it. Books have always been an escape for me." Joseph nodded thoughtfully. "Plans change. Life takes unexpected turns. The measure of a person is how they handle those turns." "I'm still learning," Grace admitted. "Aren't we all?" Joseph replied with a small smile. "I worked 30 years at that factory, breathing in dust and noise every day. Not what I dreamed of as a boy, but it put food on the table, sent Langston to school. Sometimes the dream changes, becomes something you never imagined but needed all along." His words stayed with Grace throughout the evening and into the next day as they prepared to return to Atlanta. This family had welcomed her without reservation, offering love and acceptance that asked nothing in return. It was so different from the conditional approval she had grown up with, where her father's love seemed always tied to her obedience and adherence to his expectations. The bus ride back to the city was quiet, both Grace and Langston lost in their own thoughts. As the familiar Atlanta skyline came into view, Grace broke the silence. "I think I know what I want to do," she said, her voice steady with newfound conviction. "About what?" Langston asked. "My future." "Our future," Grace explained. "I've been drifting since we left Magnolia Springs, taking the first job that came along, just trying to survive. But I want more than that. I want purpose." What kind of purpose? Langston asked, his interest piqued. I want to help young women like me, girls trapped by expectations and family pressure who don't know they have choices, Grace said. I was lucky to find the courage to leave, but so many don't. They stay in situations that slowly kill their spirit because they don't see another way. Langston nodded encouragingly. What would that look like? I'm not sure yet, Grace admitted. YB counseling or creating some kind of support group. I'd need education, training. Then that's what we'll work toward, Langston said simply. You supported my dream of having my own nursery someday. I'll support yours. The new year brought renewed determination. Grace continued working at the bookstore, but began taking night classes at the local community college, studying psychology and social work. It wasn't easy, the long hours, the financial rain, the challenge of academic work after years away from school, but she persevered, driven by her vision of helping others find their own path to freedom. Langston was her rock through it all, encouraging her when doubts crept in, celebrating her successes, reminding her of her strength when challenges seemed overwhelming. Their small apartment became a haven of mutual support and shared dreams. Spring arrived, bringing with it their wedding date. They had chosen April, when the gardens would be in bloom, symbolic of their beginning among the roses at Oakwood Estate. The ceremony would be small. Langston's family, Delia and her boyfriend, a few friends they had made in Atlanta. They would hold it in a community garden where Langston sometimes volunteered, a place of beauty created by neighbors working together. 2 weeks before the wedding, Grace received another letter from Mrs. Peterson. This one contained news that left her stunned. Your father has been ill, the housekeeper wrote. Nothing serious, just pneumonia, but it hit him hard. The doctor says he's recovering, but he seems different, quieter, more reflective. He asked about you yesterday, the first time he's spoken your name in months. I thought you should know. Grace sat on their sofa, the letter in her trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. Langston found her there when he returned from work. What's wrong? He asked, immediately sitting beside her and pulling her close. My father's been sick, Grace explained, showing him the letter. And he asked about me. Langston was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. What are you thinking? He finally asked. I don't know, Grace admitted. Part of me wants to go to him, to see if this might be an opening for reconciliation. Another part is still angry, still hurt by how he treated us. Both feelings are valid, Langston said gently. What does your heart tell you to do? Grace closed her eyes, listening to her innermost feelings. That life is short. That holding on to anger hurts me more than him. That maybe, just maybe, his illness has given him perspective. The same way leaving home gave me perspective. Then I think you have your answer, Langston replied. But whatever you decide, I'm with you. The next day, Grace made a phone call she never thought she would make again. The Oakwood Estate number was still familiar, her fingers finding the digits without hesitation. Mrs. Peterson answered, her surprise and joy evident in her voice. Grace? Oh, my dear, it's so good to hear from you. How is he really? Grace asked after they had exchanged pleasantries. Better physically, the housekeeper replied, but changed. The illness took a lot out of him, made him face his mortality, I think, and that has a way of shifting priorities. Would he be willing to see me? Grace asked, her voice small. There was a pause on the line. I believe he would, Mrs. Peterson said carefully, though he might not admit it directly. I'm getting married in 2 weeks, Grace explained, to Langston, here in Atlanta. I'd like my father to know, maybe even to come if he's well enough. Another pause, longer this time. I'll tell him, Mrs. Peterson promised. That's all I can do. After hanging up, Grace felt a strange mixture of hope and dread. She had extended an olive branch, opened a door that had been firmly closed. Whether her father would walk through it remained to be seen. The days leading up to the wedding were a flurry of activity, final fittings for Grace's simple white dress, confirming arrangements for the small reception they would hold in Delia's backyard, making sure Langston's family had places to stay during their visit. Through it all, Grace found herself watching for the mail, hoping for a response from her father. None came. The night before the wedding, as she lay beside Langston in their bed, Grace finally accepted that Judge Halstead would not be attending. The hurt was there, a dull ache in her chest, but it was overshadowed by the joy of what tomorrow would bring, a formal union with the man she loved, surrounded by people who truly cared for them both. "Are you disappointed?" Langston asked softly, sensing her thoughts. "A little," Grace admitted, "but not surprised. It was a lot to hope for that he would change so completely." Langston pulled her closer. "People rarely change completely, but they can take small steps. Maybe your invitation was one step, and his next will come in its own time." "Maybe," Grace agreed, finding comfort in the possibility. "But either way, tomorrow is about us. Our love, our future. Nothing can diminish that." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, perfect spring weather for their garden ceremony. Grace got ready at Delia's house, her friend helping with her hair and makeup, keeping things simple and natural. "You look beautiful," Delia told her, as Grace stood in her dress, a fitted sheath of ivory lace with a simple veil. Radiant. "I feel it," Grace replied honestly, happy, complete. The community garden had been transformed for the occasion. Rows of chairs faced a simple arch twined with spring flowers. Potted plants lined the aisle Grace would walk down. Langston's cousins had strung white lights through the trees for the reception that would follow as evening fell. Grace waited at the garden entrance, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. Joseph Reed had offered to walk her down the aisle, a gesture that had moved her deeply. He stood beside her now, dignified in his best suit, offering his arm. "Ready?" he asked with a gentle smile. Grace nodded, placing her hand on his arm. The small gathering of guests stood as the guitarist began to play, and Grace took her first step toward her future. She was halfway down the aisle when she saw him, standing at the back of the assembled guests, slightly apart as if uncertain of his welcome. Judge William Halstead, thinner than she remembered, his face lined with age and recent illness, but unmistakably her father. Grace faltered mid-step, her breath catching. Joseph felt her hesitation and patted her hand reassuringly. "Keep going," he whispered, "one step at a time." She continued forward, her eyes finding Langston waiting for her beneath the arch. His smile steadied her, reminding her of what this day was truly about. As she reached him and took his hands, she felt the rightness of their union washing over her, pushing all other concerns temporarily aside. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of love, respect, and partnership. When Langston slipped the wedding band onto her finger to join her pearl engagement ring, Grace felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. "You may kiss your bride." Their kiss was sweet and tender, the beginning of a new chapter in their shared story. The small crowd erupted in applause and cheers, led enthusiastically by Langston's extended family. As they turned to face their guests as a married couple, Grace's eyes sought out her father again. He remained at the back, his expression unreadable at this distance. But he was there. He had come. It was more than she had dared to hope for. The reception that followed was joyful and relaxed. Tables had been set up throughout the garden, draped with simple white cloths and decorated with potted herbs and flowers that guests could take home afterward. A local jazz trio played softly, while everyone enjoyed the potluck meal that friends and family had contributed to. Grace circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, always aware of her father's presence on the periphery. He seemed to be waiting, watching, perhaps gathering courage of his own. Finally, as the sun began to set and the white lights twinkled to life in the trees, Grace approached him. He stood alone near a blooming magnolia tree, a reminder of home that couldn't have been accidental in its symbolism. "Daddy," she said simply, stopping a few feet away from him. "Grace," he replied, his voice rougher than she remembered. "You look beautiful, like your mother." The comparison to Elizabeth Halstead, rarely spoken since her death, brought fresh tears to Grace's eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "It means a lot to me." Judge Halstead nodded, seeming to struggle with words that had once come so easily to him in courtrooms and public speeches. "Mrs. Peterson convinced me I should be here," he finally said. "She can be quite persuasive when she wants to be." Grace smiled slightly. "She's always looked out for me." An awkward silence fell between them, years of hurt and misunderstanding creating a gulf not easily bridged. "Your husband," Judge Halstead finally said, glancing across the garden to where Langston was laughing with his cousins. "He seems well liked." It wasn't much, but from her father, it was a significant concession. "He is," Grace confirmed. "He's kind and hard-working, and he respects me as an equal. That's why I love him." Her father nodded slowly. "I didn't understand before. Couldn't see past." He trailed off. "Past what?" Grace prompted gently. "Past my own prejudices," he admitted with visible difficulty. "My concern for what others would think, my fear of losing you." "You didn't have to lose me," Grace pointed out. "That was your choice." "I know that now," he acknowledged. "The pneumonia, it gives a man time to think, lying in a hospital bed wondering if each breath might be his last. Makes some things seem important and others, not so much." Grace felt hope stirring in her heart. "And now? Now I'm here," he said simply. "Not to interfere or judge, just to see my daughter happy on her wedding day, if you'll allow it." Grace studied her father's face, seeing the pride and stubbornness still there, but tempered now with something new, a humility born of illness and solitude. He wasn't asking for forgiveness, not directly, but he was taking a step, just as she had by inviting him. "I'd like that," she said finally. "And maybe we could talk more sometime. Start rebuilding what was broken." Relief flickered across her father's face. "I'd like that too." Langston approached then, his expression careful but open. "Mr. Halstead," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming to our wedding." For a tense moment, Grace wasn't sure if her father would accept the gesture. Then slowly, Judge Halstead reached out and shook Langston's hand. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "You have a remarkable wife." "I know," Langston replied, his eyes meeting Grace's with love. "I'm the luckiest man alive." It wasn't perfect reconciliation. There were still hurts to heal, bridges to rebuild, conversations that needed to happen. But it was a beginning, one more unexpected turn in a journey that had started that day in the garden when a judge's daughter had noticed the man tending the roses. Later that night, as Grace and Langston danced under the twinkling lights, she rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked, holding her close. "For the courage to love me despite everything, for showing me that some risks are worth taking." Langston's arms tightened around her. "I should be thanking you. You gave up everything for us." Grace shook her head slightly. "Not everything. I lost things, yes, but look at what I gained. True love, real family, the freedom to be myself. I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat." As the night deepened and stars appeared above the garden, Grace caught sight of her father speaking with Mabel Reed. The judge's posture was stiff, uncomfortable, but he was making an effort. And Langston's mother, with her warm heart and direct manner, was meeting him halfway, offering coffee and a slice of wedding cake. Small steps, new beginnings, seeds planted that might, with care and patience, grow into something beautiful. Just like the roses that had brought Grace and Langston together in another garden, under another night sky, at the beginning of their love story. The wedding night was spent in a small hotel room, a luxury they had saved for carefully. As they lay together in the darkness, now husband and wife in name as well as heart, Grace felt a sense of completion, of having found her place in the world. "What are you thinking?" Langston asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never imagined my life would turn out this way," Grace answered honestly. "That sometimes the path you never planned is exactly the one you need." Langston smiled in the darkness. "Like a garden that grows wild had of a neat rose but turns out more beautiful for its freedom." "Exactly like that," Grace agreed, curling closer to him. "Our garden." The days after the wedding brought a return to their regular routines, but with a new sense of permanence and purpose. They were building a life together not just as lovers or partners, but as family. The small apartment felt different somehow, more like a true home than ever before. Grace continued her studies, her determination to help other young women growing stronger with each course she completed. Langston worked extra hours at the nursery, saving diligently toward their shared dream of his own business someday. And tentatively, carefully, Grace began rebuilding her relationship with her father. It started with phone calls, brief, sometimes awkward conversations about neutral topics. The weather in Magnolia Springs, Mrs. Peterson's health, books Grace was reading for her classes. Gradually, the calls became more frequent, more natural. Judge Holstead began asking about her studies, showing interest in her goal of helping young women find their voices. He never directly mentioned Langston, but he no longer changed the subject when Grace spoke of him. One evening in late summer, about 4 months after the wedding, the phone rang as Grace was preparing dinner. She answered to find her father on the line, his voice unusually hesitant. "Grace, I've been thinking," he began. "Your mother left a trust fund in your name. It was to be released when you turned 25 or got married, whichever came first. I held it back when you left. Out of anger, pride, it wasn't right." Grace sat down slowly at the kitchen table. "Daddy, what are you saying?" "I'm saying it's your money. Your mother wanted you to have it. I've instructed the bank to transfer it to your account in Atlanta. The paperwork should arrive next week." Grace was stunned. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," her father replied. "It should have been done months ago." After they hung up, Grace sat at the table, processing what had just happened. The trust fund wouldn't be huge. Her mother's family hadn't been wealthy, but it would make a significant difference in their lives. Perhaps enough to put a down payment on a small house, or to help Langston start his nursery business sooner than planned, or to allow Grace to reduce her hours at the bookstore and focus more on her studies. When Langston came home and she told him the news, his reaction surprised her. Rather than immediate excitement, he looked concerned. "Are you sure this doesn't come with strings attached?" he asked carefully. "Your father controlled you with money before." Grace considered the question seriously. "I don't think so," she finally said. "This feels different. Like he's trying to make amends in the only way he knows how, and it was my mother's wish, not his." Langston nodded slowly. "Then we should use it the way that feels right to you. It's your inheritance." "Ours," Grace corrected him. "Everything I have is yours now too. That's what marriage means to me." They decided to wait until the money actually arrived before making any specific plans. When it did come, the amount was larger than Grace had expected, enough to significantly change their circumstances if used wisely. After much discussion, they made a decision that felt right to both of them. They would use part of the money as a down payment on a small house, with enough land for Langston to start a modest home-based nursery business. Another portion would go toward Grace's education, allowing her to attend school full-time and finish her degree faster. The remainder they would save for future needs and opportunities. House hunting became their new shared project, weekends spent visiting properties within their budget on the outskirts of Atlanta, where land was more affordable. They had nearly given up finding something suitable when their real estate agent called about a last-minute listing. A small cottage on 2 acres, needing work, but with good bones and excellent soil. The moment they drove up the gravel driveway, both knew this was the place. The house was tiny, just 1 bedroom, a small living area, kitchen and bathroom, but it had character and charm beneath years of neglect. The land was partially wooded, with a clearing perfect for greenhouses and planting beds. A small stream ran along the back property line, providing natural irrigation. "It needs a lot of work," the agent warned as they walked through the musty rooms. "The previous owner was elderly and couldn't keep up with maintenance." "We're not afraid of work," Langston replied, already envisioning what could be done with the space. They made an offer that day, and to their surprise it was accepted without counter. Within a month, they were homeowners, stunned by how quickly their lives had changed. Moving day was both exciting and overwhelming. The cottage needed cleaning, painting, and repairs before it would truly feel like home. Friends helped transport their few possessions from the apartment, and Langston's family arrived en masse to assist with the initial work, scrubbing floors, patching walls, fixing the leaky roof. By evening, exhausted but satisfied, they sat on the sagging front porch with Delia and a few friends, drinking beer and watching the sunset over their land. "So, what will you call it?" Delia asked. "Your place needs a name." Grace and Langston exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. "Midnight Garden," they said in unison, then laughed at their perfect synchronicity. "Midnight Garden," Delia repeated, raising her bottle in a toast. "May it grow and flourish just like the two of you." The weeks that followed were grueling but fulfilling. They worked on the house in every spare moment, Langston handling the structural repairs while Grace focused on making the interior livable. Slowly, these cottage transformed from neglected to charming, each improvement a labor of love. Meanwhile, Langston began preparing the land for his nursery business. He marked out areas for greenhouses, testing soil quality and planning irrigation. He continued working at his job in the city, saving every spare dollar for equipment and startup costs. Grace reduced her hours at the bookstore and increased her course load at school, determined to complete her degree as quickly as possible. Her focus had narrowed to counseling psychology, with an emphasis on young women's issues. Her professors noted her passion and encouraged her to consider graduate studies. Their new home gradually took shape around them, reflecting their shared vision and values. The front yard became a showcase of ornamental plants, designed to attract potential customers once the nursery opened. The backyard developed into a private retreat, with a small vegetable garden and a sitting area near the stream. Inside, they filled the cottage with second-hand furniture, books and plants. It wasn't fancy or fashionable, but it was wholly theirs, created from their own efforts and choices rather than someone else's expectations. One cool October evening, as they sat by the stream enjoying a rare moment of rest, Grace shared news she had been keeping to herself until she was certain. "I've been offered an internship," she said, watching Langston's reaction closely. "At the Women's Resource Center downtown. It's unpaid, but it's exactly the kind of experience I need. Working directly with women in crisis, learning the practical side of counseling." "That's wonderful," Langston replied sincerely. "When would you start?" "January, if I accept," Grace explained. "It would mean adjusting our schedule again. I'd still have classes plus the internship hours." "We'll make it work," Langston assured her, squeezing her hand. "Your dreams matter just as much as mine." His unwavering support still amazed Grace sometimes. In the world she had grown up in, wives were expected to subordinate their ambitions to their husbands, to focus on home and family rather than career. Langston had never once suggested her goals were secondary to his. "I've been thinking about your nursery too," Grace said, leaning against his shoulder. "What if we took a bigger portion of the trust fund and used it to build the first greenhouse now? You could start growing inventory over the winter, maybe open for business in the spring." Langston considered the idea. "It would accelerate the timeline significantly," he admitted. "But are you sure? That would mean less in our emergency fund." "I'm sure," Grace said firmly. "We're both working toward our dreams. There's no reason yours should wait any longer than necessary." And so their lives settled into a new rhythm, Grace dividing her time. Between classes and her internship, Langston between his job in the city and building his nursery at home. The first greenhouse rose gradually on their property, a gleaming structure of glass and metal that would soon house the beginnings of Midnight Garden Nursery. Their first Christmas in the cottage was simple but perfect. They decorated a small pine tree from their own land, made ornaments by hand, and hosted a modest dinner for Delia and a few close friends. Langston's family visited the day after, filling the tiny house with laughter and warmth. To Grace's surprise, her father sent a gift, a beautiful set of gardening tools with carved wooden handles. The card simply read, "For your new home. Merry Christmas, Dad." It was another small step in their gradually healing relationship. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but acknowledgement, acceptance of the life she had chosen, even if he still didn't fully understand it. As winter deepened, Grace's internship at the Women's Resource Center became increasingly important to her. The work was challenging and often heartbreaking, bringing her face to face with women whose situations were far worse than hers had ever been. Victims of domestic violence, young mothers abandoned by partners, girls disowned by religious families for pregnancy or sexuality. She came home some days emotionally drained, questioning whether she had the strength for this work. But Langston was always there, listening as she processed the difficult stories, reminding her of the difference she was making even in small ways. One particularly cold February evening, Grace arrived home later than usual. She had stayed at the center to help a young woman, barely 18, who had fled her father's house with nothing but the clothes on her back after he had discovered her relationship with a boy he disapproved of. The parallels to Grace's own story had been impossible to ignore. "I couldn't leave her there," Grace explained to Langston as they sat at their kitchen table, steam rising from mugs of hot tea. "She reminded me so much of myself, except she had nowhere to go, no one to help her." "What happened?" Langston asked, his face reflecting concern. "We found her a place at the women's shelter," Grace said, "but it's only temporary. She needs counseling, education, job training. So many of these girls do." Langston reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're thinking something." Grace nodded. What if we could create a place specifically for young women like her? Not just crisis intervention, but a real program to help them build independent lives. Education, job skills, counseling, everything they need to stand on their own feet. "That's a big dream," Langston commented, but his tone was encouraging rather than doubtful. "I know," Grace acknowledged, "but it's needed. The existing resources are overwhelmed, and I think it's what I'm meant to do." Over the following weeks, the idea took shape in Grace's mind. She spoke with her professors, with the director of the Women's Resource Center, with other counselors and social workers. Everyone agreed the need was real, but the challenges were significant: funding, facilities, qualified staff. "Start small," her advisor suggested. "Maybe a pilot program through an existing organization. Prove the concept, gather data on outcomes, then expand." It was sound advice, but Grace couldn't shake the feeling that time was of the essence. Every day, women like the young girl she had helped were falling through the cracks of overtaxed support systems. Spring arrived, bringing new growth to their land and progress on Langston's nursery. The greenhouse was complete, filled with seedlings and young plants nearly ready for sale. He had designed a simple but effective irrigation system, built display shelves, and created a small office space in one corner. "We're almost ready," he told Grace one evening as they walked through the greenhouse, inspecting the thriving plants. "I'm thinking we could have a soft opening in May, just weekends at first, while I transition from the city job." "It's beautiful, Langston," Grace said sincerely, admiring how he had transformed their property in just a few months. "You've worked so hard." "So have you," he replied, putting an arm around her shoulders. "How's your final paper coming?" Grace had been working on a comprehensive research project about support systems for young women in crisis, the culmination of her undergraduate studies. "Almost done. I present next week, then graduation is the following weekend." Langston kissed her temple. "I'm so proud of you." The timing worked out perfectly. Grace's graduation ceremony fell on the same weekend as the planned opening of Midnight Garden Nursery. They decided to combine celebrations, inviting friends and family to attend both events. To Grace's surprise and delight, her father accepted the invitation. It would be his first visit to their home, a significant step in their ongoing reconciliation. The day of Grace's graduation dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for both the ceremony and the nursery opening that would follow. She stood before the mirror in their small bedroom, adjusting the cap that sat somewhat awkwardly on her blonde hair. "You look beautiful," Langston said from the doorway, already dressed in the new shirt and tie they had splurged on for the occasion. "I can't believe this day is finally here," Grace replied, smoothing the fro. Of her simple dress, her graduation gown hung nearby, waiting to be donned for the ceremony. "Sometimes I still expect to wake up back in my room at Oakwood Estate. All of this just a dream." Langston crossed the room to stand behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders as their eyes met in the mirror. "Not a dream," he assured her. "We built this life together, one day at a time." The graduation ceremony was being held at the Community College E, where Grace had completed her studies. They arrived early, finding seats saved for them by Delia near the front. Langston's parents arrived shortly after, Mabel immediately enveloping Grace in a warm hug. "So proud of you, honey," she said, her eyes shining with genuine emotion. As the time for the ceremony approached, Grace grew increasingly anxious, her eyes constantly scanning the entrance for any sign of her father. Just when she had begun to think He wouldn't come after all, she spotted him, tall and distinguished in his dark suit, looking somewhat out of place among the casual crowd. "He's here," she whispered to Langston, a mixture of relief and nervousness washing over her. Langston squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Go get ready. We'll make sure he finds us." Grace joined the other graduates, her heart full as she took her place in line. Through the doors leading to the auditorium, she could see Elle Angston guiding her father to a seat next to his parents. The image of them sitting together, her old family and her new one, brought tears to her eyes. The ceremony itself was modest compared to the grand university commencements she had attended as a judge's daughter in Magnolia Springs. But as Grace crossed the stage to receive her diploma, the cheers from her small group of supporters felt more meaningful than any formal pomp and circumstance. Afterward, amid hugs and congratulations, Grace finally stood face to face with her father. He seemed uncertain, less commanding than she remembered, but his eyes held genuine pride as he looked at her. "Congratulations, Grace," he said formally. "Your mother would have been very proud." "Thank you for coming, Daddy," she replied, impulsively stepping forward to hug him. He stiffened momentarily, then awkwardly returned the embrace. "I wouldn't have missed it," he said as they separated, and Grace believed him. It was another step in the healing of their relationship, another small bridge built over the chasm that had once seemed unbridgeable. The group made their way to Midnight Garden for the nursery's opening celebration. Grace watched her father carefully as they drove up the gravel drive to the small cottage and greenhouse. This was her life now, so different from the luxury and privilege of Oakwood Estate. Would he see it as a step down, a waste of potential? Or could he recognize the value in what she and Langston had built together? To her relief, Judge Halstead said nothing negative, as Langston proudly showed everyone around the property. He listened attentively to explanations of the greenhouse design, the irrigation system, the carefully selected plant inventory. If he found the modest cottage lacking compared to his own grand home, he kept those thoughts to himself. Friends began arriving for the combined celebration. Fellow graduates, co-workers from the bookstore, and the Women's Resource Center, neighbors who had helped with the house renovations. Tables had been set up under the shade trees, loaded with potluck dishes and a cake decorated with both congratulatory messages. "Congratulations, graduate," and "Grand opening, Midnight Garden Nursery." As the afternoon progressed, Grace found herself standing with her father at the edge of the gathering, watching Langston demonstrate proper planting techniques to a group of interested neighbors. "He knows his business," Judge Halstead commented, nodding toward Langston. "Very knowledgeable." "He is," Grace agreed. "He's been studying horticulture since he was a boy. This nursery is his dream come true." Her father was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "And you? Is this the life you dreamed of?" The question could have been condescending, but Grace heard genuine curiosity in his tone. "Not the one I was raised to expect," she answered honestly. "But yes, it's become my dream too. Building something meaningful together, helping others, living according to our values rather than appearances." Judge Halstead nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that," he admitted. "It's taken me a long time. Too long." "It's never too late to change a perspective," Grace said gently. Her father looked around the property, the small cottage with its freshly painted shutters, the gleaming greenhouse, the garden areas beginning to take shape. "You've created something good here," he said finally. "Different from what I would have chosen for you, but good." Coming from him, it was high praise indeed. Grace felt a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying lift from her shoulders. She didn't need her father's approval anymore. She had learned to trust her own judgment, to believe in her own choices. But having his understanding, or at least his attempt at understanding, healed something deep within her. The nursery's opening day was a success beyond their expectations. Several neighbors made purchases. Word-of-mouth recommendations brought in curious customers from nearby areas, and Langston booked 2 landscaping consultations for the following week. As evening approached and guests began to leave, Grace found herself sitting on the front porch steps with her father, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. It reminded her of the garden at Oakwood Estate, where their rift had begun and their love story had blossomed. "I've been thinking about your mother's roses," Judge Halstead said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "They haven't been the same since Langston left. The new gardener doesn't have his touch." Grace smiled at the implicit compliment. "Roses need attention and care. They can sense when they're being neglected." "So I've learned," her father replied, and she knew he wasn't just talking about flowers. Before leaving, Judge Halstead handed Grace an envelope. "A graduation gift," he explained, "and something for the nursery too." Inside was a check, substantial but not overwhelming, not enough to create dependence but enough to make a difference. With it was a note, "For your future." No strings attached. Grace hugged him tightly, whispering "thank you" against his shoulder. It wasn't just the money that mattered, but the message behind it: trust in her judgment, respect for her choices, belief in her future. As spring turned to summer, Midnight Garden Nursery established itself in the community. Langston's knowledge and passion for play. Tess drew customers seeking advice as much as products. Grace helped on weekends, finding that her counseling skills translated well to customer service, especially with anxious new gardeners. Meanwhile, her dream of creating a support program for young women in crisis continued to develop. She had begun volunteering additional hours at the Women's Resource Center, gathering data and developing a comprehensive proposal for a pilot program. "The biggest hurdle is space," she explained to Langston one evening as they sat on their porch, going over her notes. "The center is already overcrowded. We need somewhere to host workshops, provide counseling, maybe even temporary housing in some cases." Langston listened thoughtfully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What about here?" he suggested. "We have land. We could build something simple, nothing fancy but functional." Grace looked at him in surprise. "Here, but this is your nursery, your business." "Our land, our dreams," he corrected gently. "There's plenty of space beyond the greenhouse. We could start with a workshop building that could double as classroom space, maybe eventually add small cabins for emergency housing." The idea took root in Grace's mind, growing and developing just like the plants in Langston's greenhouse. A place of healing and growth for wounded spirits, alongside a nursery that nurtured red plants and flowers. There was a beautiful symmetry to it. With renewed purpose, Grace refined her proposal, incorporating Langston's suggestion of using their own property. She presented the plan to the director of the Women's Resource Center, who was immediately supportive. "This addresses so many of our limitations," the director said, reviewing the detailed proposal. "Having dedicated space outside the city would be ideal for many of these young women. A peaceful environment, away from the situations they're trying to escape." The next steps came together with surprising speed. The center agreed to partner with Grace, providing professional oversight and access to existing resources. A small grant from a women's foundation would cover initial operating costs, and with some of her father's graduation gift, they could begin construction on a simple but functional building to house the program. By late summer, the foundation was being poured for what they were calling the Garden House, a multi-purpose space where classes, counseling sessions, and workshops would be held. Local contractors, impressed by the mission, offered discounted services. Friends and neighbors volunteered labor for the simpler tasks. One hot August afternoon, as Grace was marking out garden beds that would eventually surround the new building, a car she didn't recognize came up the driveway. A young woman stepped out, looking around uncertainly. "Can I help you?" Grace called, walking over to greet the visitor. "I'm looking for Grace Reed," the young woman said. "The Women's Resource Center gave me this address. They said she might be able to help me." Grace's heart quickened. "I'm Grace. What can I help you with?" The young woman, barely 20, Grace guessed, twisted her hands nervously. My name's Sophie. I'm trying to leave my parents' house. They want me to marry this man from our church, but I don't love him. I want to go to college instead. The echo of her own story wasn't lost on Grace. Come inside, she said gently, leading Sophie toward the cottage. Let's talk about your options. That evening, after Sophie had gone, armed with information about educational opportunities, legal rights, and a promise of ongoing support, Grace sat with Langston on their porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. She's the first, Langston observed, the first of many who will find their way here. Grace nodded, a sense of rightness settling over her. The garden house isn't even built yet, and already the work is beginning. That's how gardens grow, Langston replied with a smile. They start before you can see them, seeds in the dark soil, gathering strength, waiting for the right moment to push through into the light. Over the following months, the garden house took shape alongside the thriving nursery business. By autumn, the building was complete, simple but welcoming, with large windows to let in natural light, a central gathering space, smaller rooms for private counseling, and a fully equipped kitchen where cooking classes and communal meals could be held. Grace developed a structured program based on her research and experience at the Women's Resource Center. Young women would participate in workshops on financial literacy, career exploration, and healthy relationships. They would receive individual counseling to address trauma and build self-esteem. For those who needed it, there would be assistance with education and job placement. The official opening of the garden house coincided with the first anniversary of Midnight Garden Nursery. They combined the celebrations, inviting the community to see BOT-H ventures and understand how they complemented each other. It's not just about growing plants, Langston explained to visitors as he conducted tours. It's about growing lives, opportunities, futures. Grace watched him with pride, marveling at how fully he had embraced her vision, making it part of their shared mission. The nursery was doing well, turning a modest profit in its first year. The garden house program was still in its infancy, but already making a difference in the lives of the young women who participated. Among the guests at the celebration was Judge William Halstead. His visits had become more frequent over the past year, the awkwardness gradually fading as he became more comfortable with Grace and Langston's life together. Today, he seemed particularly interested in the garden house, asking thoughtful questions about the program and the young women it served. "I'm impressed," he told Grace, as they walked the grounds together. "You've created something meaningful here, something important." "Thank you," Grace replied, touched by his sincere approval. "It feels right, helping these young women find their own paths." Her father was quiet for a moment, his expression contemplative. "I've been thinking about your mother's trust fund," he said finally, "the main portion of it. I've been holding it in reserve, waiting for the right moment." Grace looked at him in surprise. "I thought you'd given me all of it with the graduation gift." Judge Halstead shook his head. "That was just a small part. Elizabeth left specific instructions about the bulk of her inheritance. It was to be used for a purpose Tahat would make a meaningful difference in women's lives." Those were her exact words. "I never knew that," Grace said softly. "I didn't tell you," her father admitted. "I had my own ideas about what constituted a meaningful difference. Political campaigns, established charities, things that fit with our social position. But seeing this place, understanding what you're doing here, I think this is exactly what Elizabeth would have wanted her money to support." Grace felt tears welling in her eyes. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that as trustee of your mother's estate, I'm prepared to endow the garden house program with the full remaining balance of her trust fund," Judge Halstead stated formally. "Enough to expand your facilities, hire qualified staff, and ensure the program's sustainability for years to come." Grace was speechless, overwhelmed by the gesture and its implications. Not just the financial support, which would transform what they could offer, but the healing it represented between father and daughter. "Daddy, I don't know what to say," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Say you'll use it well," her father replied simply. "Say you'll help those young women find their way just as you found yours." That evening, after all the guests had gone and the property was quiet, Grace and Langston sat by the stream at the back of the Ireland. The water gurgled peacefully over smooth stones, carrying away the day's heat. "I still can't believe it," Grace said, her head resting on Langston's shoulder. "My father endowing the garden house, using my mother's trust for this purpose." "It's perfect," Langston replied, his arm around her waist. "Your mother's legacy living on through the help you give these young women. Your father finding a way to support your choice, rather than fighting it." Grace nodded, watching the moonlight dance on the rippling water. "It feels like everything has come full circle, from that first day in the garden at Oakwood Estate to this place we've created together." "Our midnight garden," Langston murmured, kissing her temple softly. "Our midnight garden," Grace echoed, feeling the rightness of it deep in her soul. The year that followed brought growth and change to both their ventures. With the endowment from her mother's trust fund, the garden house expanded its facilities and programs. They built 3 small cabins on the property to provide emergency housing for young women in crisis situations. They hired a full-time counselor to assist Grace, who had taken on the role of program director while continuing her own education with graduate courses in psychology. Midnight Garden Nursery flourished as well, developing a reputation for quality plants and expert advice. Langston added a second greenhouse, specializing in rare and medicinal plants. He began offering workshops on organic gardening and sustainable landscaping, drawing participants from throughout the region. Together, they had created something neither could have accomplished alone, a place of healing and growth for both plants and people. The property hummed with activity during the day, customers browsing the nursery, young women attending workshops at the garden house, volunteers helping with the ever-expanding gardens. But Grace's favorite time remained the evening hours, when the day's business was done and peace settled over their land. She and Langston would often walk the grounds together, discussing the day's events, planning for the future, or simply enjoying each other's company in comfortable silence. One such evening, as spring was once again turning the world green, they paused by a newly planted rose garden near the garden house. The bushes were still small, but Langston had selected varieties that would bloom abundantly once established. "These will be beautiful by next year," Grace commented, kneeling to check the soil around one of the plants. "The girls will love having roses outside their classroom windows." Langston smiled, watching her with a tenderness that hadn't diminished with time. "I was thinking we might need another garden so on," he said casually. "A smaller one, with especially gentle plants, safe ones." Grace looked up at him, puzzled by his tone. "What do you mean?" Langston knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I mean, we might need a garden suitable for a child to explore, a child of our own." Grace's breath caught as his meaning became clear. "Are you saying you want to start a family?" "If you're ready," Langston replied, his eyes searching hers. "I know we've been focused on building all this, and your studies and the program, but I've been thinking lately that our home has room for one more dream." Tears filled Grace's eyes as joy bloomed in her heart. She had thought about having children, of course, but had put those thoughts aside while they established their various ventures. Now, with both the nursery and the garden house running smoothly, perhaps the time was right. "Yes," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "I think I am ready. I'd love to have a child with you, to raise a family in this beautiful place we've created." Langston pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the setting sun bathed the garden in golden light. "Our child will have the freedom we never had growing up," he murmured against her hair. "Freedom to choose their own path, to follow their heart. And the security of knowing they're loved unconditionally," Grace added, "no matter what choices they make." That night, as they lay in bed discussing their new dream, Grace found herself thinking of how far they had come from those first secret meetings in the garden at Oakwood Estate. From forbidden glances and whispered conversations to this life they had built together. A home, a business, a mission, and now perhaps a family. All because she had dared to climb down that trellis one summer night. All because Langston had risked everything to love a judge's daughter. All because they had both believed that some chances were worth taking, some loves worth fighting for. In the months that followed, they prepared for the possibility of a child while continuing to nurture their other dreams. Grace completed her graduate coursework, earning a master's degree in counseling psychology. The Garden House program gained recognition throughout the state, with other communities expressing interest, replicating their model. Midnight Garden Nursery expanded its customer base and added mail-order services for specialty plants. And on a perfect autumn day, just over 3 years after they had fled Magnolia Springs together, Grace confirmed what she had begun to suspect. They were expecting a child. The news was met with joy from everyone in their extended family. Langston's parents immediately began planning a visit to help prepare the nursery. Delia offered medical advice and emotional support. Even Judge Halstead, who had become a regular visitor to their home, expressed genuine happiness at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. "A new generation," he commented during a Sunday dinner at the cottage. "A chance to do better than we did." Grace, watching her father interact with Langston with genuine respect, if not quite warmth, felt the truth of his words. They all had a chance to do better, to learn from the past without being bound by it. As winter settled over Midnight Garden, Grace found herself drawn to the greenhouse on cold afternoons. The warmth and humidity created a peaceful haven where she could sit among growing things, one hand resting on her gradually swelling belly, feeling connected to both the past and future. It was in this quiet space that she finally completed a project she had been working on for months. A journal documenting the story of how she and Langston had found each other, defied convention, and built a life based on love rather than expectations. She wanted their child to know the truth of their beginning, to understand that sometimes the greatest gifts come from the courage to choose one's own path. On the final page, she wrote, "Your father and I met in a garden at midnight, finding in each other the freedom and acceptance we both craved. We risked everything for that Elove, and in return, we gained a life more beautiful than either of us could have imagined alone. You, our precious child, are part of that beauty, part of the garden we continue to tend with care and hope. May you always find the courage to follow your heart, and may you always know that our love for you, like the love that brought us together, has no conditions and knows no boundaries." Spring arrived just as Grace entered her final trimester. The property bloomed around her, Langston's roses opening their petals to the sun, young women at the Garden House flourishing under the program's guidance, the nursery business thriving in its 3rd season. On a warm May evening, with the scent of flowers drifting through open windows, their daughter entered the world, Elizabeth Rose Reed, named for Grace's mother and the flowers that had brought her parents together. As Grace held her newborn daughter, Langston B, aside her on the hospital bed, she felt the completion of a circle. From the lonely, obedient girl she had been at Oakwood Estate, to this woman who had created a life of purpose and love. From secret meetings in a moonlit garden to this family born of courage and commitment. "She's perfect," Langston whispered, gently touching his daughter's tiny hand. "She's free," Grace replied, understanding flowing between them. "Free to become whoever she's meant to be." Outside the hospital window, the moon rose over Atlanta, the same moon that had illuminated their first kiss by the fountain, their whispered promises, their midnight escapes. But they no longer needed to meet in shadows or hide their love from judging eyes. They had created their own garden, open to the sun, where love grew strong and true in the light of day. And in that garden, a new life had taken root, promising seasons of growth and beauty for ye hours to come. As Elizabeth Rose slept peacefully in her arms, Grace looked at Langston, the gardener who had tended not just roses, but her heart, and knew with absolute certainty that every risk had been worth taking, every challenge worth facing. For this was their truest harvest, a love that had transformed not just their lives, but the lives of countless young women who found their way to the Garden House. A love that would continue to grow and flourish, season after season, like the most treasured roses in their midnight garden. The end.